ready to get more done in a day than you thought possible.
Who isn't?
Well, today's deep dive is all about rewiring our brains for productivity. We're talking about Charles Duhigg's Smarter, Faster, Better.
This isn't just another one of those time management books.
No, not at all.
Duhigg goes way deeper.
Way deeper.
He digs into neuroscience and psychology.
The psychology of productivity. Love it.
He uses really interesting case studies, too. Like, did you know he talks about air traffic control?
No. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's about how they make high-stakes decisions under pressure.
See, that's what I love about this kind of stuff. It's not just about checking things off a to-do list. It's about understanding how our brains work.
Exactly.
So we can work with them, not against them.
100%. And one of the things that Duhigg emphasizes is the power of making choices.
Okay, but we're not just talking about, like, should I have pizza or salad for lunch?
No, it's even simpler than that. Duhigg says that even tiny, almost insignificant choices can have a big impact on our motivation. Yeah, he talks about how even choosing which email to answer first, instead of feeling overwhelmed by your inbox, can make a difference.
Interesting. It's like tricking your brain into feeling more in control.
Precisely.
Instead of being like, ugh, I have a million things to do, it's like, okay, I'm choosing to tackle this right now.
Yes, and that tiny act of decision-making, Duhigg says, can give you a little boost of motivation.
Like a little dopamine hit.
Exactly. It triggers those reward centers.
Okay, so small choices, big impact. I like it. What else stood out to you?
Well, this one really resonated with me, the concept of stretch goals.
Ooh, stretch goals. Sounds intense.
It is a bit. Basically, these are those big, ambitious goals, the ones that might even seem a little bit impossible at first.
So not just like clean my desk, but more like write a novel.
Exactly. Like run a marathon when you haven't even gone for a jog in a year.
Okay, so how do you avoid getting completely overwhelmed by a goal that big?
That's where Duhigg brings in the idea of SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
So breaking down those massive goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly.
So instead of run a marathon, it's run for 30 minutes 3 times this week.
Exactly. You've got it. It's about creating a roadmap to get to that big, exciting destination.
I love that. So we've got tiny choices for quick motivation boosts and stretch goals for those big picture dreams.
Yeah.
What else does Duhigg have in store for us?
How about we dive into mental models?
Okay, mental models. Lay it on me. What are those?
So imagine this. You're a pilot, you're mid-flight,
Uh-oh, this sounds stressful already.
and suddenly there's an engine explosion.
Oh my gosh.
What's your first reaction?
Panic? I mean, is there another option? I'd be freaking out.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
But Duhigg talks about this incredible real-life example of Qantas Flight 32,
Good.
where the pilot, faced with this terrifying midair crisis, stayed unbelievably calm and focused.
Wow. How is that even possible?
Well, Duhigg argues it was the pilot's ability to use these mental models.
Okay, so what exactly is a mental model?
Think of it like a story we tell ourselves, a framework for understanding how things work, how we expect them to unfold.
Okay, so in this case, the pilot had a mental model for
Yes.
what to do if an engine exploded.
Yes. He had trained himself to visualize different scenarios, rehearsed how he'd respond, so when the unexpected happened,
He was ready.
he had a plan.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But how do we apply that to, our everyday lives?
That's the thing, you totally can.
Really?
It's about being proactive instead of reactive.
I like that.
Like, let's say you've got a big presentation coming up.
Okay. I get nervous just thinking about it.
Right, but what if, beforehand, you visualize yourself delivering it flawlessly? You picture yourself confidently answering questions.
Interesting. So it's like mental rehearsal, like
Right.
athletes visualizing their performance before a game.
Exactly. By practicing in your mind, you're preparing yourself to handle those high-pressure situations with more grace and effectiveness.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the power of choice, setting stretch goals, and using mental models to stay cool under pressure. What other brain hacks does Duhigg have up his sleeve?
Well, let's talk about the power of teams.
Okay, teamwork. I'm all ears.
Have you ever been part of a team that just clicked?
Oh, absolutely. Where everyone felt comfortable sharing their ideas, even if they were a little out there.
Exactly. And then, on the flip side, I'm sure you've experienced teams where it felt like everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid to speak up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those are the worst.
The difference often comes down to something called psychological safety.
Psychological safety. Okay, that sounds intriguing, but break it down for me. What does that even mean?
It's about creating an environment where everyone feels safe to speak their mind, to disagree, even make mistakes without fear of being judged or ridiculed.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, Google actually did this massive study on teams, Project Aristotle, and guess what they found?
What?
Psychological safety was the #1 predictor of a team's success.
Really? Even more important than having a team full of brilliant minds.
You got it.
Wow.
Turns out brilliance can be totally stifled if people don't feel comfortable sharing their ideas.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So how do you actually build that kind of environment, that psychological safety within a team? Is it as simple as, like, putting beanbag chairs in the conference room and hoping for the best?
I wish it were that easy.
Right.
Duhigg offers a bunch of practical strategies, but one of the simplest is just making sure that everyone has a chance to speak in meetings, even if it's just for a minute or two.
It's about making sure everyone feels heard and valued.
Exactly.
Because when people feel safe to contribute, that's when the magic really happens.
100%. You get more creativity, better problem solving, and ultimately a more successful team.
That makes a lot of sense. So psychological safety is about speaking up, but it's also about being sensitive to others, right?
Yes, it's about social sensitivity.
Okay, so being aware of how your words and actions impact other people.
Exactly. It's about reading the room, being empathetic, understanding that everyone brings their own experiences and perspectives to the table.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of respect and understanding where people feel seen and appreciated.
So much of what we've talked about so far has been about shifting our mindsets, our approaches to work. Like, we're not just talking about checking things off a list, but really changing how we think about productivity.
Exactly.
It feels like Duhigg is giving us a whole new playbook for thinking, collaborating, and innovating.
I agree. And speaking of innovation, this part really blew my mind. You know how we always hear about these like lone genius inventors? Duhigg kind of debunks that myth.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
He's saying that real innovation, true innovation, it's often about connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots.
Yeah, taking existing ideas, stuff that's already out there, and finding new ways to combine them.
Okay, I like that. So it's not always about coming up with something completely brand new. It's about looking at things with fresh eyes.
Yes. He uses the example of Disney's Frozen.
Frozen.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know the movie, the one that like every kid and their snowman has seen a million times?
Yeah, let it go.
Huge hit. So apparently the original script, total flop.
Get out. No way.
It wasn't until the writers started tapping into their own personal experiences, like their relationships with their siblings, that the story really came to life.
Wow, so they took something that was failing and then by connecting it to something, real, something personal, it became this massive success.
Exactly. And it's a powerful reminder that innovation isn't always about reinventing the wheel, Sometimes it's about looking at familiar things with a fresh perspective and finding those unexpected connections.
I love that. So no more pressure to have these like groundbreaking, never before seen ideas, right?
Right.
It's more about being curious, drawing inspiration from different fields,
100%.
not being afraid to experiment.
He talks about how the sticky note, the ubiquitous office supply,
Oh yeah, everyone's got a sticky note somewhere.
it was actually inspired by a failed attempt to create a super strong adhesive.
Wait, really? The sticky note was an accident?
Kind of. Sometimes the greatest inventions come from those unexpected mishaps, those things that we see as failures at first.
That's so interesting. It's about being open to possibilities, even when things don't go according to plan.
Exactly.
It feels like everything we've talked about today, from those tiny choices we were talking about earlier, to setting those big, audacious stretch goals, to these mental models, it all comes back to the idea of working with our brains, not against them.
That's the genius of this book, Smarter, Faster, Better.
Mm.
It's not about forcing ourselves into some kind of rigid productivity mold.
Right.
It's about understanding the science of how our brains work and using that knowledge to our advantage.
I have to say, I'm feeling incredibly inspired after digging into Smarter, Faster, Better. It's not just a book about getting things done. It's like a guide to unlocking our full potential.
I know, right? It really gets you thinking differently.
Totally. And the best part is, Duhigg manages to take all these complex scientific concepts and make them relatable. It's a really fun read, even if you're not a brain surgeon.
Right. And those stories he tells, so engaging.
Okay, so to wrap things up, if our listeners are feeling stuck or overwhelmed or maybe just curious about how to upgrade their thinking.
Definitely pick up a copy of Smarter, Faster, Better. You won't regret it.
Absolutely. But before you run off to the bookstore, tell us what you think. What resonated most with you? What's your biggest takeaway from Smarter, Faster, Better?
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Head to the comments, and let's keep this conversation going.